Hi, this is Her Voice Unfiltered, where the words don't ask for permission, they just arrive. I'm Michonne, poet, healer, storyteller, and this right here, this is where we feel it before we fix it. So, let's put some feeling to these words. There comes a point in healing when the question is no longer, who am I? The question becomes, what am I allowing around me? Because environments shape us, conversations shape us, relationships shape us, the stories we repeat shape us. And after spending so much time becoming ourselves, we owe it to that version of us to be intentional about the atmosphere we create. Tonight, we're talking about the things that fill the room, the things we carry, the things we allow to linger, the things that either help us breathe or slowly take our breath away. This first poem is called Let Love Be the Smoke That Fills the Air. Not rushed, not demanded, just present, curling itself around bare shoulders and whispered confessions, drifting between the spaces where your hands end and my surrender begins. Slow, intentional, unhurried, not the kind that chokes you or blinds you or leaves you searching for exits. I mean, the kind of love that curls itself around two souls and whispers, stay a while. Let it drift through conversations that don't require performance. Let it drift through laughter that arrives without effort. Let it drift through silence that doesn't need to be explained. Let love settle into the furniture of our lives until comfort becomes a language we both speak fluently. Let it cling to the sleeves of our favorite memories so that years from now, we still carry traces of each other without trying. Because the best love isn't the fire everyone notices. It's the smoke that remains long after the flames have stopped dancing. The evidence that something warm and sacred was here. Because I love love. Don't you? So, you do know love is powerful, right? Not because it changes what we see, because it changes how we feel. And once I started paying attention to the atmosphere around me, I started noticing something else. People don't just occupy space in our lives, they influence the version of us that shows up. Some people make us bloom, some people make us shrink. And if we're honest, most of us have been both. This next piece is called The People We Become Around People. I used to think relationships were measured by how long they lasted, how often we talked, how much history we shared. But nobody told me to pay attention to who I became in their presence. Because some people are mirrors and some people are magnifying glasses. Some people reflect your light, others enlarge your wounds. Some people make you laugh louder, dream bigger, stand taller, and somehow convince you that the things you thought were impossible might just be waiting on your courage. And then there's others who make you question yourself, one conversation at a time, not with cruelty, not always, sometimes with subtlety, a raised eyebrow, a dismissive comment, a lack of support disguised as realism, until one day you wake up and realize you've been shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. I have been both versions, the woman who bloomed and the woman who became smaller, the woman who felt seen and the woman who spent years translating herself into a language someone else could understand. But healing taught me something. Pay attention. Pay attention to your spirit, not just your feelings. Because your spirit always knows. It knows who leaves you energized, who leaves you exhausted, who celebrates your growth, and who secretly mourns the version of you they had more control over. I learned that love alone is not the measurement. History alone is not the measurement. Chemistry alone is not the measurement. The question is, who do I become when I am with you? Do I feel safe enough to tell the truth? Do I laugh more? Do I dream more? Do I recognize myself? Or do I spend time with myself, editing, filtering, and minimizing the very things that make me whole? Because the right people don't require a smaller version of you. They create space for your expansion. They applaud your evolution. They hand you mirrors instead of masks. And when you leave their presence, you don't feel drained. You feel reminded of your worth, your voice, your purpose, your light. So these days, I pay less attention to who wants access to me and more attention to who I become around them. Because that tells me everything I need to know. So the hardest part wasn't realizing certain people affected me. The hardest part was realizing some of them were still affecting me long after they were gone. Because people can leave your life and still live in your head. A comment, a criticism, a rejection, a story someone told about you that accidentally you started believing. Before I knew it, I had given old opinions permanent addresses. Which brings us to our next piece, called The Furniture in My Mind. Someone handed me an opinion, and I gave it a permanent address. Not because it was true, not because it deserved to stay, but because somewhere along the way, I forgot. I forgot that every thought doesn't deserve residency. So I let it move in. A careless comment, a criticism disguised as concern, a label someone placed on me during a chapter they never bothered to understand. And instead of questioning it, I furnished a room for it. I gave it a chair at the table of my confidence, a couch in the living room of my self-worth, a key to places it should have never entered. Years passed, and I kept wondering why I felt crowded, why I couldn't hear my own voice, why every decision felt filtered through the expectations of people who no longer occupied my life. Then one day, healing knocked on the door, not gently, not politely. Healing walked in, looked around, and asked, "Who invited all these people?" And for the first time, I noticed the space. The old teacher who said I wasn't enough, still sitting there. The former friend who misunderstood me, still sitting there. The relationship that ended years ago, still stretched across the sofa like it paid rent. The strangers, the critics, the doubters, the ghost of conversations that should have expired a long time ago. All of them comfortable, all of them settled, all of them living rent free inside my head. Meanwhile, the voice of God was standing outside waiting for an invitation. My confidence was waiting in the hallway. My peace couldn't find a place to sit. My joy was balancing in the corner because I had filled every seat with fear, rejection, and old narratives. So I started evicting people, not from my life, but from my mind. I carried out assumptions, boxed up insecurities, dragged old accusations to the curb, opened the windows, let fresh air in, made room for the truth, made room for grace, made room for the woman I am still becoming, because healing isn't always adding something new. Sometimes healing is realizing you've been overcrowded by stories that never belonged to you. And the day I stopped giving strangers furniture in my mind was the day I finally had room to sit with myself. There is something powerful about an eviction notice. Not the kind you serve to other people, the kind you serve to fear, to self doubt, to old narratives. Because once you clear enough space, something beautiful happens. Fresh air finally has somewhere to go. And that's when I realized healing wasn't just about what I was releasing, it was about what I was choosing. This next piece is called The Air I Breathe Now. I used to think survival was the same thing as living. Waking up, showing up, pushing through, smiling when I was tired, nodding when I was overwhelmed, carrying weights that never belonged to me and calling it strength. I had become so accustomed to chaos that peace felt unfamiliar. Run that back. I became so accustomed to chaos that peace felt unfamiliar. So accustomed to confusion that clarity felt suspicious. So accustomed to proving myself that rest felt undeserved. And somewhere in the middle of all that surviving, I forgot what it felt like to breathe. Not the automatic kind, not the lungs expanding kind. I mean the soul deep kind, the kind that reminds you you're safe, the kind that settles your spirit instead of startling it, the kind that doesn't require armor. Because every room has an atmosphere, every relationship, every conversation, every thought, something is always filling the air. Fear, pressure, expectation, resentment, joy, grace, peace. Something is always present. And one day, I realized I had been inhaling things that were making me sick. Not physically, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Breathing in self-doubt, breathing in old wounds, breathing in other people's opinions until I could no longer distinguish their voices from my own. So I made a decision. I stopped fighting for access to places where I couldn't breathe. I stopped begging for understanding from people committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped choosing validation from those who had already decided who they thought I was. And instead, chose fresh air. I chose peace, even when chaos was louder. I chose boundaries, even when guilt knocked at the door. I chose rest without apology. I chose relationships that felt like exhaling. I chose environments that nourished me instead of draining me. I chose God's voice over the noise. And slowly, the atmosphere changed. The heaviness lifted. The tension loosened. The constant need to explain myself began to disappear. I laughed more, slept better, dreamed bigger, trusted deeper, not because life became perfect, but because I became intentional about what I allowed to fill the room. These days, I pay attention to the air I breathe, the conversations I entertain, the thoughts I nurture, the spaces I occupy, the people I allow close enough to influence my spirit. Because peace isn't something I stumbled upon. It's something I protect. And after everything I've survived, everything I've released, everything I've learned, I refuse to return to places that leave me gasping. This air, this peace, this joy, this clarity, I fought too hard for it. And now it is the air I breathe. So you see, peace changes you. Not all at once, not dramatically, quietly, one boundary at a time, one lesson at a time, one breath at a time. And eventually, after enough healing, enough releasing, enough becoming, you discover something unexpected. The thing you were searching for all along wasn't somewhere out there. It was waiting for you within. This final piece is called home. For a long time, I thought home was an address, a city, a set of familiar walls, a place where people knew my name and my memories lived in the corners. I thought home was something you could lose, something you could leave behind, something you spent your life trying to find again. But life has a way of teaching lessons through departures. People leave, relationships change, dreams evolve, doors close, maps get redrawn, and suddenly the places you thought would always be there exist only in photographs and stories. I know. I've stood in empty rooms saying goodbye to versions of myself I would never be again. I've packed entire seasons into cardboard boxes, folded memories between pieces of newspaper, carried grief across state lines, and wondered if starting over would ever stop feeling like losing something. But somewhere along the journey, I discovered a truth that changed everything. Home was never the house. It was never the zip code. It was never the relationship. It was never the title. Home was the place inside me I kept abandoning while searching for it everywhere else. The place where my voice didn't need permission, where my worth didn't require validation, where my spirit could finally rest. The place where I stopped apologizing for becoming. The place where healing was allowed to take up space. The place where joy didn't have to earn its seat at the table. The place where God had been waiting patiently the entire time. And now, when people ask me where home is, I smile because the answer is different now. Home is the peace I fought to protect, the boundaries I learned to honor, the lessons I survived long enough to understand, the love I finally learned to give myself. Home is waking up and recognizing the woman looking back at me, not because she has it all figured out, not because she never struggles, not because she never doubts, but because she finally knows she belongs to herself. Maybe that's what home has always been. Not a destination, not a person, not a place waiting somewhere in the horizon, but the moment you stop running from yourself and decide to stay. So after all the leaving, after all the searching, after all the becoming, I finally arrived. Not at a house, not at a city, not at a relationship. I arrived at me. And for the first time, that feels like home. Therapy complete. Sometimes the greatest journey of our lives isn't finding where we belong, it's realizing we belong to ourselves all along. Good night, and thank you for sitting with me.